There is a 670-foot skyscraper standing in the financial district of Lower Manhattan, 2 blocks from the East River, that has never been finished and may never be finished. It topped out at 60 stories. It was supposed to hold 80 luxury condominiums priced from $1.2 million to more than $18 million for the penthouse. 71 of those 80 units sold before the building was complete. Deposits were taken, and then construction stopped. The glass started coming off the facade, and the building was left standing half-finished, swaying in the wind, leaning measurably to the north. It has been frozen in that state for years. The locals call it the Leaning Tower of New York. Some call it the banana because the building is not simply tilted, it is bent. And the reason it is bent is the single most revealing detail in this entire file, because the bend was not an accident. The bend was an attempt to fix the lean. It did not work. This is document number 4. The 161 Maiden Lane file is open. The address is 161 Maiden Lane. It is also marketed as One Seaport. The developer was Fortis Property Group, which acquired the site in 2013 for $64 million and planned a condominium sellout of $272 million. The architect was Hill West Architects. The structural engineer was WSP Global, the same firm, and I want you to note this. It is currently a named defendant in the lawsuit over the cracking facade at 432 Park Avenue, which is file number 2 in this series. The original general contractor was an Italian firm called Pizzarati. Construction began in 2015. And the story of what went wrong begins underground before a single floor was poured, with a decision about the foundation. Every major skyscraper in the financial district of Manhattan is built the same way. The bedrock in that part of the island sits roughly 50 feet down beneath a layer of landfill that has been accumulating along the East River shoreline since the 18th century. The standard technique used since the late 1800s is to drive steel piles down through the landfill and into the bedrock, so the building's weight rests on solid rock rather than on compressible fill. Every tower around 161 Maiden Lane was built on driven piles to bedrock. It is not an exotic technique. It is the default. It is how you build tall on a Manhattan waterfront. According to the lawsuit, later filed by the contractor, Fortis did not do that. Instead of driving piles to bedrock, the developer chose a method called soil improvement, sometimes called jet grouting, which involves injecting grout into the soil to stiffen it, creating a firmer base without going all the way to rock. According to reporting on the litigation, this choice saved Fortis roughly $6 million, around 2.2% of the overall construction cost. The geotechnical firm that originally studied the site, RA Engineering, had recommended driving piles to bedrock and had declared that with a pile-driven foundation, the building's settlement and movement would be negligible. The piling route was the recommended route. The soil improvement route was the cheaper route. The cheaper route is the one that got built. If you want to follow how a $6 million decision turns into a building that may have to be demolished, and if you want to read the next file in this series the day it opens, the way to do that is to subscribe to the construction files now. Millennium Tower was File 1. 432 Park was File 2. This is File 4. The pattern you are watching unfold here is the same pattern in every file, and the channel is built so you can read them in order. In 2018, a contractor on the project noticed that the building had begun to lean. One corner of the concrete foundation mat had settled unevenly, and that uneven settlement rippled upward through the floors, so that by the time it reached the upper levels, the structure was measurably out of plumb. The lean was approximately 3 inches to the north. Now, 3 inches across 670 feet of height does not sound like much. But in a building, plumb is everything. The elevators run in vertical shafts that must be vertical. The glass curtain wall is fabricated in flat panels designed to hang on a structure that is straight up and down. The plumbing, the doors, the floor slabs all assume the building is vertical. When the structure goes 3 inches out of plumb, the glass panels stop fitting. The anchors that hold them misalign, and on a building this tall, With this much glass, a panel that is not properly anchored is not a cosmetic problem. It is a panel that can fall 600 feet onto a Manhattan sidewalk. This is where the engineering decision was made that gave the building its nickname. According to multiple accounts of the project, once the lean was discovered, the upper floors were constructed deliberately angled in the opposite direction to counteract the tilt and bring the top of the building back over its base. The intention was to straighten the building out by leaning it back the other way as it rose. The result was not a straight building. The result was a building that curves. It leans one direction at the bottom and corrects the other direction at the top, which is why the people who work near it call it the banana. The structure is not tilted like the Leaning Tower of Pisa. It is bent like a banana, and a bent building cannot simply be jacked back into plumb because there is no single direction to push it. The deformation is baked into the concrete, floor by floor, permanently. In 2017, before the lean even became public, a worker named Juan fell to his death from the 29th floor of the project. Investigations into the site found safety violations. The concrete subcontractor, a firm called SSC High Rise, later pleaded guilty to manslaughter in connection with a separate safety failure on the project and paid restitution. The New York City Department of Buildings issued multiple citations. Work stopped more than once over safety concerns before it stopped for good over the lean. The contractor, Pizzarati, sued the developer, Fortis, in 2019. The lawsuit stated that the building had unusual settlement of up to 3 inches and was leaning 3 inches to the north, and that the lean was the result of the foundation decision made before Pizzarati joined the project. Pizzarati wanted out of its contract, arguing it was unsafe for workers or future residents to be inside. Fortis fired back, calling the lawsuit, quote, patently false from start to finish and nothing more than simple defamation, and stating that engineers had deemed the site safe, despite what Fortis called a misalignment issue. A second engineering firm, Thornton Tomasetti, brought in by the contractor, asserted that the tilt was even worse than reported, leaning by 4 inches before the full weight of an occupied building was even in place. One of that firm's senior engineers warned in writing that the ongoing movement of the top of the building long after top out suggested the long-term creep behavior was far more significant than anyone had accounted for, and that additional movement would occur as work progressed. I personally think that warning is the most important sentence in the entire file, because it means the building was not finished moving. A building that has settled and stopped is a building you can at least assess. A building that is still creeping, still moving years after it topped out, is a building whose final position nobody can guarantee. Fortis replaced Pizzarati with a new contractor, Ray Builders, who redesigned the curtain wall to adapt to the tilt. Work resumed briefly, and then, by the middle of 2020, large sections of the glass curtain wall had been removed entirely, and all progress on the exterior stopped. The slosh stabilizers, the damping systems designed to reduce the building's sway in high wind, were, according to reporting on the project, never installed on the upper floors. Which means the half-finished tower has been standing in lower Manhattan, exposed to the wind off the East River, with no system to control its movement for years. If you have made it this far into the file, you already know what kind of channel this is. The way I keep opening these files is the same way every independent investigation gets made, by people who decide to subscribe and stay. If you have not already, subscribe now. The next file is in production. The current state of the building, as of the most recent reporting, is unchanged in every way that matters. The structure is still standing, still incomplete, still leaning, still bent. It is tied up in a web of lawsuits between the developer, the former contractor, the lenders, and the buyers who put deposits down on units in a building they may never be able to move into. Engineers consulted on the building have said that any genuine fix, any real underpinning of the foundation to arrest the settlement and correct the lean would be enormously complex and would cost, in the words of recent reporting, 9 figures. That is at least $100 million to fix a building whose entire planned sellout was $272 million. Multiple observers, including engineers, have suggested the only realistic path forward is full demolition. But demolishing a 60-story reinforced concrete tower in the dense financial district on a footprint that small is itself an enormous and dangerous undertaking that nobody has agreed to pay for. So it stands. It has become, in the words of one real estate executive quoted on the project, one of those symbols of what can go wrong in a project. It was supposed to have beautiful south and east-facing views over the river. Instead, it became the Leaning Tower of New York, a 670-foot monument to a $6 million decision. I personally think one detail closes this file better than any other, and it is this. The geotechnical firm that studied the site at the very beginning, RA Engineering, recommended driving piles to bedrock and stated plainly that with that foundation, the building's movement would be negligible. That recommendation existed. It was on paper. It was the correct answer, and it was available before construction started. The entire catastrophe, the lean, the bend, the removed glass, the dead worker, the manslaughter plea, the lawsuits, the 71 families with deposits on units that do not exist, the building that may have to be torn down before it is ever lived in, all of it flows from the decision to not follow that recommendation in order to save $6 million on a $272 million project. The savings were 2.2%. The cost of those savings was the entire building.